Hey there, it's Matthew again, Carer Activist. This time doing lecture on carers and advocacy. Now, as you can tell from my videos on my YouTube channel, and do visit them, I raise awareness, do lectures regarding carers of those going through mental health, or I do lectures on those caring for someone with cancer. It's not just about the carers themselves, but their rights, information on services, whether it be mental health services, and trying to navigate them or navigate through health services if you're a cancer carer. And quite a lot of the stuff that I'm discussing can be applied to other types of carer roles. When I'm talking about care, I'm talking about unpaid carers, like caring for a close family member or a close friend, not a care worker. You're not being paid to do it. It's more like stuff you're doing in the family. So as you can see from the first sort of slide here, I'm going to be discussing and raising awareness and teaching about carers advocacy, because you'd be surprised that not many carers out there know that they can get hold of advocacy. And a lot of it will be relating to mental health settings, but it can be applied to all carer types. And the reason why advocacy is so important is it can inform carers about their decision-making progress, or not progress, but process in regards to a choice or a solution they might find useful. Obviously, the important thing about advocacy is it can't always make the decision for you. To be honest, it's down to yourselves as carers, but they can inform, and they can give you more options on what to choose when you're caring for someone. It's not just about choices, but there's a load of other things. So let's go into it about what I'll be going through today. So several slides. I'm going to try and keep things short. Knowing me, I do waffle on a bit. I want to talk about the vital role of advocacy services, how they can empower carers for advocacy, supporting carers in care planning. And when I'm talking about care planning, I mean, again, I will focus a lot on a mental health setting. Um, the key point is to involve carers when it comes to discharge, or even when someone's on a mental health ward, their loved ones are in the ward. There's section there, but we still need to hear from the family or the person providing that unpaid care. Navigating confidentiality issues with advocacy, I think that's one of the main things really that carers need to be aware of. If they're struggling with confidentiality, then they should try and use advocacy as a way to navigate it. Not always, but it's certainly one of the tools in the carer's toolbox. And there are other things. It's not just advocacy. There are other things to help navigate confidentiality issues depending on that situation. And also, it's not just confidentiality, but there's breakdown in communications, complaints and disputes. Very common in mental health settings. It's an emotional role, a mental health care. And when I say mental health care, I'm about those who are caring for someone with mental illness, mental ill health. It's an emotional role. There will be crisis situations, disputes, misunderstanding. This is where advocacy can provide the link. Remember, though, there are other things than advocacy, but I'm just presenting on this today. Facilitating effective communication. I'm going to this heavily now. Obviously, I need to wait till I present this thing, but the key word here is jargon, and it's so important that again carers understand what's being told to them. And this is a criticism of the mental health system. This can be way too much jargon, and that can impede the decision-making process of the family or carer, and make them feel like they're not really involved. And empowering carers to self-advocate. It's not always about advocacy. It's about empowering carers so next time they find themselves in that situation, they can reach a decision faster. Um, there are problems though with advocacy when it comes to this sort of thing. I won't discuss it much here. I think I'll save that for another presentation. Ensuring rights and recognition for advocacy, a big one. carers' rights, and I'm going to sum this all up. So let's continue, because I just want to try and keep this lecture to time. I don't need to go on like for an hour like I do with my other lectures. So the vital role of advocacy service, right? So the hint here really is it helps to educate carers. That's like what I'm doing now, really, on their specific own caring situation, providing that crucial information, and it's all down to law. It's all down to legal rights. So what we've got here is support. How can advocates inform and support carers? With support services. When I say support services, it could be mental health services. Care Act 2014 is another law. Mental health legislation is really old and it's been revamped. That's this year, 2024. So it's the carers' rights, and carers should know their rights and within those laws, so that way they can reach an informed decision. Care services are meant to amplify the carers' voices. It doesn't always happen. So care services help carers understand their legal rights. The key word here is legal. Entitlements and available support services such as carers assessments. One thing to note, not all advocates are the same. Again, it's got to be another presentation, another lecture for another day. There are different types of advocates. So you won't, you might get an advocate in a mental health setting and maybe an IMHA with perhaps an independent mental health advocate or an AMP, an approved mental health advocate. Something that I'm going to present on another lecture. So certain advocates, I'm not going to tell you something about care assessment. They might hint to it, but they won't be experts. You probably get another advocate talking about financial benefits, and this time I'm talking about advocates at carer centres. Now, please, please, please look at that video. I know it's an hour long. You can just cut through it. I've put a ton of contents in that video so you can skip through certain things. Look at what that video in regards to how care centres can help unpaid carers, because these are advocates that I'm talking about. You won't get an improved mental health advocate talking about financial benefits. No way. They'll talk about other things in regards to your rights as a carer when it comes to supporting your loved one in a mental health setting or when they're discharged into the community. So what you see here more is advocacy within a care centre setting, or even probably through the local authority. And they were talking about, your rights and access through respite care, financial benefits, things like that, and even more. Advocacy service support carers in crisis. So the time to use advocacy services will be just before it hits crisis, but then it might be too late. So therefore, you're scrambling for information and support. So this time, they're guiding carers through challenging situations, offering advice and necessary steps and contacts in order for carers to get assistance. So your loved one's probably about to be discharged, to be honest, and you're wondering what's the decision-making role in regards to this, or they've just been sectioned in the through the mental health act. So you're wondering, okay, how can I be more involved in their care? So that's the vital role of advocacy. How can advocacy, though, empower carers? And it's meant to empower carers, not meant to push them away. So any carer watching this lecture, do take note. So the idea really is to educate carers, again, information on legal rights, entitlement, support services that are out there. Remember, there are different types of advocates. They must amplify the carer's voice. It's not a one-way discussion. Carers need to be heard and be fed back their concerns to the advocate or what the carer's worries are. I will see to provide a lecture on questions carers should be asking advocates. But the idea, and this is, I'm going to be political here, the idea is advocacy should be slightly tailored to the carer situation. It shouldn't be just read from a script. No carer situation is completely the same. So the carer should really be saying, this is my issue regarding my loved one in a mental health ward or in a service. What can I do? What are my options? So the options will be changing. It's not going to be the same. but hence ensuring carers' perspectives are heard. So that, again, another rule of an advocate is that they will engage with like your psychiatrist or your social or the social worker, the care coordinator, pharmacist. You'll talk to them about, your sort of concerns as a carer, and want to make sure that the care is heard. And it doesn't always happen though, but it's important. That's one of the roles of an advocate in a mental health setting. So it ensures care aspects are heard and considered in care planning discussions. Building self-advocate. Now, this doesn't, I don't think this tends to happen a lot. And I think, again, I will look into this in the future. Equipping carers with tools to effectively communicate and assert their rights. This is basically empowering carers for advocacy. The problem is, if it's great if you find out about advocacy, that's brilliant. The situation is, what can you do after that? And the next time your loved one's using services, there should be some sort of training, some sort of note taking that is passed to the carer, so the carer next time knows that they can self-advocate. So when they see a situation, they know straight away what to decide. So it's important to equip carers on self-advocacy skills. I think it's a slide later on. I'll be talking about this a bit more often. Accessing support, so helping carers navigate available resources for their own well-being and assistance. So it's not always about their loved one. It's about pointing carers back to what support they can get as well. And it's more likely you'll find in a care centre an advocate through there. This is the care planning situation, and you're more likely going to get an advocate in perhaps, and I want to keep saying mental health setting because that's my sort of background. An advocate talking about how can carers be involved in that care planning. It's going to be difficult for an advocate to always mention about the care planning setting if they're in a care centre because of confidentiality situations, not really going to have the cared for's care plan, or if one was done previously. So you're more likely to have an advocate if you're lucky, um, trying to involve you as a carer in the care plan setting. So how did they do this? Well, prepare for meetings. I mean, to be fair, you can get advocates from care centres that help you prepare for meetings. I think this is common all the way around. The care will come up saying, look, got a ward round coming up at a mental health inpatient unit. I've never been before. What what do I need to plan for? So basically, an advocate, whether it be a care centre or on site and in an inpatient unit, assist carers to get ready for a care planning session or meetings with the mental health professionals. You go in without an advocate or going unprepared, the decisions you make might be very critical in regards to how you support and care for your loved one. Make the wrong decision, and it can make your care role a lot more difficult and the care situation for your loved one difficult. So it always helps to talk to an advocate when those things come up, even if you get a fair idea about how to prepare for those meetings. Advocates should also support the carers in facilitating communication. So there will be times advocates, even from a care centre, might come along to that meeting. And I've got here limit jargon because I think I mentioned that earlier on. There's problems with jargons in those meetings. In fact, I'm going to be now political and controversial here again. It is a bit about power. Sometimes professionals just want to rush to the next ward round meeting. So they will, may, by habit, use a bit of jargon to speed things up. Sometimes use jargon to throw carers off. And I'm not saying this doesn't happen. It can really happen. So it helps to have an advocate here to say, halt, what do you mean by a specific word that you've mentioned? How does this affect the carers in this meeting? Don't sort of force a decision that will affect how the carer will care for their loved one. So basically, it's help carers communicate effectively during discussions, ensuring their concerns are expressed. Limit jargon, and it's not just jargon that is a problem in some of these care plan meetings. Yeah, then you mentioned you addressing the concerns. So what advocates might do if they do attend that meeting is they might slow down that meeting a bit to make sure if a case mentioned to them before that meeting that there was a concern or that there was a question or worry to help in regards to care planning process when your loved one um is maybe on their way to being discharged into your care, or even if there's care concerns on the inpatient unit while the patient service user or your loved one is sectioned. So it's addressing concerns. Hence, I'm going to give an example. Um, your loved one might have been a restraint on the ward, and they might you visited them on the ward, and you can see signs of harm, or the patient or your loved one told you this, but they've not told the professionals. They're too scared, so you're going to raise it. I mean, that's an extreme example, but it happens. There are other concerns as well. Medication is one of them. So, how can advocacy help carers navigate this big one? I call it the big C, confidentiality, a big problem when it comes to involving carers, especially if there's relationship breakdown with the patient or the loved one in a care setting. So as you can see, it assists carers in understanding the limits of confidentiality and accessing relevant information. This might not always happen. There might be a situation where the loved one would desperately want to involve the family carer, and a fair bit of time this is the case. But there are cases when confidentiality gets in the way of a carer trying to support their loved one because there's breakdown in communication. And as I mentioned, this second bullet point here, don't forget to see my mouse pointer. It says, in situations where communication between carers and mental professionals break down, and they sometimes do, or where there's disagreements about the care plan, advocacy, or services, or advocacy services act as mediators. So therefore, the advocate would say to the carer, these are your options, these are your rights. To express them. If you can't, I'll help you express them to the mental health professional. Remember, being controversial again is a bit about power. The mental health professional wants one thing to go a certain way, but they might not understand how this impacts on the carer. Last thing I mentioned here is ensure the carers are informed about what information they can rightfully access in mental health settings. So controversial again, there is information that can be given to the carer on the carer's rights and what information they can access about their loved one. It's not we cannot give you no information at all, and if they say that something's not quite right, so they should be saying, what can you access as a carer? And again, this is another lecture for another day in regards to this one. Let's move on. So handling crisis situations and disputes. And I'm afraid this is something that can happen, unfortunately, but advocates are there to help you as a carer get information and support regarding your loved one. So it's guiding care for the mental health system, which can be complex anyway. Advise on the necessary contacts and actions. So there might be situations where an advocate will say, okay, I think I'm going to contact a solicitor on this situation. They might not fully know. And solicitors actually do come on ward rounds. Obviously, they would need to because the section process, a patient should be given rights and access to a solicitor. But that solicitor can also represent the carer. Again, another lecture for another day. Because if you don't have an advocate all the time, the solicitor will often be there, or it should be, in regards to ward round settings, just to make sure rights and regulations are followed and that the concerns of the patient and the carer can be represented. And this is free, by the way. You don't have to pay if the patient has a solicitor present to support them when it comes to legal issues. And going back to advocacy, support in disputes, these things can happen. Providing support and advice to carers facing disagreements with mental health. And I did cover this already, Ricky, in the previous slide. Accessing emergency support. So assisting carers in understanding how to access it. This is obviously planning for the future as well. and escalating concerns effectively. And I've sort of jumped the gun a bit. I did mention about solicitors, and I'm not talking about any solicitor. I'm talking about mental health solicitors. They're specific. I'll try and cover them in another presentation. But if things do get out of hand, that's one way it might be escalated. Mediating discussions. So mediating discussions between the care and mental health services, not just the psychiatrist, but it could be through the pharmacist, it could be through the social worker. The idea really is to reach mutually beneficial solutions by what options the advocate is giving the carer. But the carer decides, not all the time, but most of the time the carer decides. It can be tricky. So I can advocates facilitate effective communication in mental health care. And to be fair, it can be facilitated in other types of care settings, but my background really and my experience is through the mental health care setting. So establishing clear channels of communication. So advocacy services help create open lines of communication between the carers and mental health professionals to ensure information flows effectively. And what you got to be careful here is whatever's mentioned to the carer should be noted down so carers can look through it and then decide. It shouldn't be just always just sort of talked to the carer. It's got to be noted down, and there's clear lines of communication as well. Some of the advocates might just raise carers' concerns themselves. Encourage that. So it's a bit of an education lesson to the professionals. Advocates promote active listening skills among carers and professionals to enhance understanding. And the big key word here is empathy and communication. This again, it's a big issue. There's seems to be lack of empathy when it comes to engaging with carers. When carers notice this when professionals are not really empathetic about the care situation. But it's a tricky one, this one. But the idea is that advocate helps. They don't just promote it, they just try and help to encourage active listening because, as I mentioned, in a mental health setting, it's rushing again from the next ward round meeting to the next, to the next, to the next. And supposed to be fair, a bit controversial, people get tired and they don't really want to listen and they want to push a decision through. There are tools to advocacy service, hence resources and tools to improve communications. Certain guidelines must be set for mental professionals to see and view when it comes to active discussions and conflict resolution strategy. I'm afraid this could be something, another lecture for another day on this one. But the communication tools are there, specific for carers and to help mental professionals understand the role of an advocate and why they are there, why they are advocating for the carer. Otherwise, what could happen, and there's a number of things, the mental professional will just ignore the advocate and they'll ignore the carer. And before long, you're going to get complaints. Crises might happen and people start asking questions as to why these things weren't followed. Why is there no, why staff aren't trained regarding engaging with the advocate and the carer. And addressing communication barriers, obviously there are loads. Advocates assist in identifying and overcoming communication barriers that might hinder effective interaction between the carer and the mental health services. Again, so I've mentioned this a few times, but I'll always put this back in because the problem is I do want carers to know that they don't always have to keep relying on the advocate, and there should be something so important for the future. Carers must self-advocate at some point. The reasons carers need to do this, and there's several, is they might not always be able to get hold of an advocate. So it's critical that carers are empowered to self-advocate after a while, and not just in mental health settings, but mainly through. I'm talking really through the care centres. So educate on legal rights. A bit of an issue because legal rights change over time, but not not often. But this is to inform carers about their legal rights and entitlements. So as long as you're in that caring role, and caring roles can be fairly long depending on what you're caring for, you need to know your rights and entitlements. How carers can, advocate for themselves when it comes to communications and provide training not just with professionals, but to carers actually to effectively communicate with the mental health professionals. I did mention previously there should be training to mental professionals to recognize carers. Reason why family carers need to be there on certain situations, or at least to hear them out. Guidance on care systems. So advocates, let's say, at care centres can offer guidance on navigating complex care systems. And there's nothing more complex, I think, than the mental health system. So it helps carers to know how to navigate those things. Whole another presentation or lecture on that one. Empowerment. It's all about empowering carers to assert their rights confidentially. So they can't be sort of locked out of those meetings. And if they're in those meetings, they can't sit there quietly. In fact, it's the worst thing to do for your carer. Sit there quietly at a ward round meeting. Or another one is your care plan approach, CPA meeting, care plan approach meetings, or meetings when it comes to concerns, complaints. Don't sit there quietly. Be prepared for those meetings. Push for an outcome. There's a lot of risk. Your loved ones' well-being and your own well-being as a carer, but carers should be empowered to assert their rights confidentiality or confidentially, ensuring rights and recognition through advocacy. So basically informing carers of legal rights. A lot of this stuff is through the law. And the reasons through the law is sometimes there'll be liberties taken. Carers might be ignored. A situation happens and carers saying, well, because I've been advocated on my legal rights, I'm going to hold you to account, which is within the law. So advocacy services educate carers on their legal rights, entitlements, and available support services to ensure they're well informed about their rights within the mental health care system. It's also recognizing carers are meant to be their families and carers' contributions and these are recognized and respected by mental health professionals. And this is a bit of an issue. As I said, mental health professionals want to rush. Sometimes they don't understand about why families and carers need to be there. This, I'm afraid, is a sad fact. They might view care. I'll give you a good example. A carer will come on to a ward round or a meeting regarding a loved one. The professional, by definition, will think, I know more about the profession than you. Who are you to tell me what your role is and, what you're here for? It's sad that I'm saying this, but it does and can happen. Carers can end up being ignored by the definition of that they're not the professional, but carers are the experts in their role regarding their loved one. But there is a clash because you might have some professionals saying, well, no, hang on, I've been trained for many years in my role. So who are they to come into this ward round and tell me what to do? And so you get all this, it's a sad situation. So therefore, by this picture, you see an advocate listening to a carer that they're being ignored when it comes to those meetings. So the advocate will give them information and options that help support the carer in their decision making. So let's wrap this up. Conclusion: advocacy is meant to empower carers. They're meant to give them options, solutions, advice, even raise things on the carer's behalf. Advocacy services in themselves are essential. So if there's a situation with a mental health trust that doesn't even have advocacy service for carers, then there should be questions as asked why, or they should at least refer families and carers to advocacy. And the point in this lecture is to say this is the importance of advocacy in mental health settings. They can't be excluded. It should help voice in the decision making. They play a crucial role in ensuring carers have a voice in the decision making process. The end of the situations, the carer should decide. Sometimes it's not always possible, but they should give options to carers on the decision making process. Advocacy provides financial support, financial support services to carers, helping them navigate the complex systems. Again, this can be a bit of a tricky issue due to time. The mental service is a very complex system, not just on the inpatient unit, but even outside in the community, which is even more complex. Um, advocates should help carers access necessary resources as well. So it's not just advocacy, it's other resources to help the unpaid carer. And it should be an inclusive environment. By empowering carers, advocacy services contribute to a more inclusive and supported mental health care environment. So again, mental health setting that doesn't have advocacy, I think is not inclusive. They're missing certain things. And if they don't have it, they should at least refer carers to either, it could be an independent advocate, it could be an advocate, a mental health care support officer can also act as an advocate. Without advocacy, carers are lost in the mental health system. And it's a very sad situation if you hear or if you experience that sort of thing. And thanks for dropping by. I will be doing more lectures in the future and I'll try and keep them short. As you can understand, there's so much involved in regards to what families and carers face. And it's not just advocacy, it's you can literally write an encyclopedia on these sort of things. Thanks for listening. If you like this video, do give me a like and do subscribe, and hope to see you again soon.